All right, everyone, it's time to weigh in on Charles Manson. Supposedly, his health is deteriorating and he's in grave condition. Now, I can't verify that. It could be like the last time where they said, oh, Manson is dying, he'll be dead by tomorrow. And of course, he had some sort of stomach thing, I think like ulcers or something. And yeah, after a couple days, he got better and they sent him back and he recovered. But we do have to keep something in mind. He is 83 years old. He's probably demented. Judging from the last few conversations I heard of him that were recorded in more recent years, he's fucking lost it. He probably doesn't even know his own name half the time at this point. So, we've got to keep that in mind too. You can just sort of, this person is just dying. They're just old. Their heart's going to stop at some near point in the future. There's no specific details on his condition. So I'd like to weigh in here. This will be the next to last time I ever address him, short of him actually having died, which could happen in the next day or two, assuming that he's basically on his deathbed, which is possible. Again, we don't have specific verification of that, but it could be the case. I would like to give my thoughts on Manson, as well as some of his so-called friends, and the case in general, and my feelings about these things. Because I know that people will ask me. Like, I put it on Twitter last night when it's trending. It's like, oh, Charles Manson might be dying. And people are like, ah, ha, ha, good, good riddance. He's taking up too much space, basically, in the world. I feel a little bit more sympathetic towards him, and I'll tell you why. I still do not believe that he inspired or commanded the Tate LaBianca murders. I don't believe it. I'm sorry, but I don't see enough evidence of it. All we have for evidence of the fact that he ordered anything are the anecdotes told by other people who were around him, all of whom were high at the time, several of which were offered immunity or lessened sentences at the time in exchange for their testimony. Yeah, why wouldn't they blame Manson for it? Why wouldn't they? These are all the squeaky clean sort of suburban kids. They're fucking terrified of the idea of going to prison. Manson's like, he's over on the side. He doesn't fucking care. He's already been in prison half his life at that point. He's like, yeah, I've spent like 15 the last 30 years of my life in jail. Who fucking cares? Go ahead and railroad me. Why do you think he attacked the judge at one point? He doesn't care. He doesn't care if they beat him. He's already been beaten a million times. But as to his fans, these people who say, oh, Charlie's the greatest, he's like a hippie wizard or something. You're totally fucking wrong. It's exactly the same as what we see right now with Trump, oddly enough. We see some of his fans, so-called, on the far right. They basically use the same reasoning as his opponents on the so-called left who say, like, well, he's a racist, he's bigoted, he dog whistles to his racist fans. And all of his racist fans say, yeah, he's dog whistling to us, isn't it great? Haha, praise Keck. I know the Kekistan stuff is separate from the actual alt-right. Just so everyone knows, I'm not unaware of this fact. The left may not be aware of it, I am, but it's splitting hairs. It's seen as the same by his ideological opponents. And they say, well, yeah, Trump believes like we do. Manson has alluded to this multiple times in interviews over time, that the image that people have of him, including the image of many of his followers, so-called, it's basically just a slight moral inversion of what all of his opponents said. So Bugliosi or somebody like that says, well, he's a hippie cult leader. And his fans say, yes, he's a hippie cult leader, we just think that's a good thing. And that's the only difference. They're making the same fucking argument. During the Satanic Panic, Charles Manson was likened to Satanism because Nicholas talked to him. By the way, his book is the best on the subject. Nicholas Schreck interviews him. And all of a sudden, it's Manson the Satanist. During the Satanic Panic, which is, one reason, I think, why so much material at the time was made. And so then Geraldo goes in and says, oh, Satanism this and the devil that. This man is, basically the irredeemable version of the devil himself. He has, he considers himself to be a witch. And of course, it was never true, but his fans at the time. All of a sudden, a new whole generation, a new crop of twisted kids who spin records backwards and read a half-assed grimoire ones. All of a sudden they say, oh, Charlie is our savior too. Haha, he is the Antichrist. Or so, in the 90s with environmentalism, the far right, Manson comes out and proposes Atwa, basically, which later on becomes a very good album name. He says, well, it's air, trees, water, animals, the world's dying. All of a sudden, the far right seizes upon that and starts talking about how Manson is the symbol of environmentalism in the 1990s. Oh, these evil new wave hippies, the Greenpeace kids, they are worshiping Manson. And so naturally, some really hardline environmentalists started worshiping Manson and talking about Atwa. It became sort of a self-fulfilling thing. And this is now happening as well currently. You probably saw, now that we are in the golden age of social media. Did you not last night see how many people were likening Charles Manson to Donald Trump? Because it's, once again, a whole new generation of people is being indoctrinated into the same dichotomous moral panic bullshit. That is, that people will start supporting Manson yet again. It'll be just like the Iraq War, the early era there, the takeoff of the sort of Atwa days. Was basically Charles Manson the symbol of revolution against the establishment. They're going to do it all over again. So you can look for, the media is going to start comparing Manson and Trump, number one. People on the right will be talking about his so-called left-wing views. People on the left will do the same. And then we'll see where it goes from there. But expect a few more years of Manson mania, especially if he keels over, because every legacy media outlet's going to run it into the ground talking about it. When he dies, I'll make one last video basically summing everything up. I'll give his death statement, since probably nobody else will. At least nobody who anyone would take seriously, because most of them, they carve a swastika in their forehead. I wonder why people don't listen to what they have to say. So I think I'll do that. But I strongly recommend, if you're interested at all in knowing, like, basically the real truth of the case, that Manson is a con man, certainly guilty of many counts of larceny, stole cars, pimped people, dealt drugs. He was a scummy man. Not a murderer, but a scummy man. If you want to understand the deeper dynamics behind that, read Nicholas Schreck's Myth and Reality of an Outlaw Shaman. Manson File. I do not know whether the 2011 version is still available. I think the French one is, but I don't know if the English one is, because I believe he intends to rewrite it and make a third edition. Of course, the original's from the 80s. It's also shorter, less in detail, and Nicholas, I believe, has basically disowned much of the original 80s content in the original work because it's outdated and wasn't accurate. Apparently what happened is Manson had a little bit of fun with him too, like telling him things that weren't quite true, and this is another thing Manson does. He amuses himself. He's bored. He sits in a cell 23 hours a fucking day. I feel slightly sorry for him, because even someone who's scummy shouldn't be railroaded into prison for an excessive period of time for something that I still don't believe he's responsible for. I do not think he commanded any followers of his to murder anybody. I think he told Tex Watson, who was afraid of getting stabbed in the kidney by some bikers over bad mescaline, I think he told Tex, hey, Sebring has drugs, why don't you just go fucking get some drugs, rough him up a little, if he doesn't want to cough him up, get some drugs, deal them back out at an increased price, and pay off the bikers so that they don't come down on my head. And here's a gun just in case. Handed him the gun. That was really, it sealed his doom. He was trying to keep Tex Watson from getting killed by a bunch of bikers, and Tex Watson ended up saying, oh, Charlie commanded me to murder after he listened to a Beatles album on LSD. That's bullshit. That's moral. You can't see how that's the same as saying, hey, Jimmy listened to Iron Maiden back in the 80s during the Satanic Panic. Now he worships the devil and kills people. He slit his own mother's throat because of Iron Maiden. That's bullcrap. It doesn't happen that way. It's impossible for it to happen that way. This sounds like every anti-drug PSA known to man. That was the original reason when I looked into the case at all. Beyond simply Manson screwy. And even now, I think, he says screwy off-the-wall things. I thought it at the time, too. It's amusing, but it is off the wall. When I looked into the case and saw the specific helter-skelter explanation writ large by Bugliosi himself, I said, that's bullshit. Here I am, I'm experimenting with psychedelics. I'm like, it's not going to cause me to hear weird messages on a Beatles album. It doesn't make sense. But at the time, it made sense to people because the sort of proto-heavy metal of Helter Skelter really, really scared a lot of people at the time. The Iron Butterflies and early Sabbath really got people going. Then you have a band like Coven, around the same time, no less, talking openly about devil worship. It kind of fried out people's minds. They were still stuck in the the Cleavers mentality or something. Leave it to Beaver. No, yeah, it's white picket fences. No atheism allowed here. We worship only Jesus. Oh, broke their mentality. All of a sudden they saw acid-washed Satanists everywhere. And this continued. The Church of Satan didn't help because, of course, Anton in San Francisco was giving people a good spook show as well. But no, Manson may be dying. Could be dead soon. When he's done, then I'll do the final Manson video. I fully expect, by the way, there'll probably be a spike in viewership on my alternate channel because I've got so much Manson material there. I just decided to put the documentaries there. Like, I took down all the Manson music because some of it's good. And that's the other thing. His other redeeming facet is he's a good musician. Not a great musician, but he's good. Good enough for the Beach Boys to steal several of his songs when they were on some hard times. And they did. That's actually true. Cease to Resist is based on Cease to Exist, which is a Manson song. Melcher helped him record it, then stole the song for 2020. That's part of record. It actually happened. I believe they ended up having to settle over it, actually. But then the music as motive thing fell apart because, of course, Watson knew Melcher had moved away, so that's sort of out the window. But you can expect some more Manson mania. It never goes away. I can remember the Manson mania of the early Iraq War, when a lot of people were saying, oh, you know, Charlie warned us about Zeitgeist or something. Charles Manson warned us that the New World Order was coming, basically. And all of a sudden you have these people who are, you know, at my age, they're like 19, 20 years old, talking about Manson all the time, saying, oh, well, his music has secret messages. I can remember that. They'll do it again, too. Yeah, now finally, now that he's dead, maybe we'll see the end of Manson mania. Until like the 100th anniversary, I'm sure 100 years later, they'll still be trying to milk it for money. Guaranteed. You're just like Jack the Ripper. Meanwhile, Manson, a sick, crazy old man, a long-term con who's been in jail, what, 75-80% of the years he's spent on this friggin' planet. Meanwhile, he has to sit back and look at he has to answer letters from people who think that he's a hippie cult leader, and they actually like him for it. He must think that they're crazier than he is. And he's demented at this point. He probably, again, sometimes he probably doesn't even fully know his name or where he is. He probably forgets he is in prison. At this point, he's probably already won. He has like these weird, vivid hallucinations just from dementia that he's actually outside. Oh yeah, and this poop I just grabbed out of my ass is chocolate, and he actually enjoys it. And guarantee stuff like that happens all the time with him. At this point, he's not exactly going to cult lead anybody. That's about all. Peace out.